ATA for refusing to forgive my sister after she exposed my biggest secret to my fiancé, just to test his loyalty? I knew the secret would follow me like a shadow. I just didn't expect my own sister to haul it into the sun in front of the one person I wanted to trust me without conditions. Before anyone says I should have told him myself, I agree on my timeline, in my words, with context. The secret is that during my early 20s, I had a gambling problem that started with harmless poker nights and slid into payday loans and maxed cards. I clawed out, sold my car, worked double shifts, entered a program, and paid every cent back over 3 hard years. I haven't relapsed in 6. It's been the most humbling part of my life, and also the most private. My sister knew because she bailed me out once with a no-interest loan and a lot of tough love, and I thought that history made us closer. When I got engaged, I told myself I'd share everything with my fiancé after we settled the venue, when the stress dipped and we had a quiet weekend. I didn't want the story to be a bomb dropped into our planning, or worse, to be a test he had to pass to prove his love. I wanted it to be something we could walk through together, not a performance. My sister decided my careful plan was selfish. She said honesty meant now, not later, and that men show their true colors when surprised. She wrapped it in concern, but the truth is she collected other people's secrets like shiny stones to hold and judge. Still, I didn't think she'd weaponize mine. I didn't think she'd make a spectacle out of the ugliest version of me I've spent years repairing. She did it during our engagement brunch, when our families clinked orange juice and made jokes about cake tastings, and our parents had finally stopped treating us like kids. She chose that moment and called it love. It began with a slideshow my mom put together, childhood photos, weird bangs, my fiancé as a lanky teenager in a too-big suit. People were laughing and pointing until the last slide froze, and my sister raised her glass and started talking about accountability, about building marriage on truth, about how secrets rot under floorboards. She had that soft, reasonable tone that made people lean in. Then she said some of us have debts that aren't just money, and she looked straight at me. My fiancé's smile dropped like a coin. She told the room that years ago I'd borrowed money to feed an addiction, racked up credit cards behind the family's back, hung out with people who would have cut my brake lines to get paid, and if any man was going to stand next to me for life, he should know what he was signing up for. She even mentioned the program I attended, like it was a punchline. There were no fireworks or screaming, just that crushing silence that makes your skin remember every wrong thing you've ever done. I felt stripped and small and 15 again. My fiancé reached for me, but the touch felt like a spotlight I hadn't turned on. Later, he told me he would have loved me through it, and that he still would, and he meant it, I think. But the way he said it had a new carefulness, like he was speaking around a bruise he hadn't had time to name. My dad was furious with my sister, my mom cried about family and forgiveness, and my sister stood by the mimosa pitcher with her chin high, insisting she had prevented a bigger hurt. She swore she did it for me, that if he left now it would hurt less than if he discovered it years later with a mortgage and kids. She said this was a test of his loyalty, and we should be grateful she administered it before vows, before rings meant handcuffs. People always say no one can make you feel anything without your permission, but the truth is public humiliation has its own physics. It rearranges the air. After the guests left and the dishes sat sticky in the sink, the arguments looped like a damaged record. My fiancé said he wasn't going anywhere, but there was a chalk outline around the future we imagined, and we kept stepping around it. He started asking practical questions in a careful voice, how bad it got, what triggers I had, what safeguards I still used. He wasn't wrong to ask. I had answers for all of it, no credit cards except one with a tiny limit, self-exclusion from betting apps, a sponsor I still meet monthly, a savings plan with automatic transfers. But intimacy turned into inventory, and every truth felt like another document in a file labeled caution. Meanwhile, my sister doubled down, texting me articles about financial infidelity and statistics about relapse like she was leading a seminar. She wanted me to admit she protected me from my worst impulse, except the worst impulse wasn't secrecy, it was self-destruction, and I had been managing it for years without her supervision. My parents begged me to talk it out, to remember that my sister had supported me when I was drowning, and I do remember. I also remember she chose a moment designed to humiliate me because spectacle made her feel righteous. The day after the brunch, my fiancé and I met with my sponsor, and we talked about shame and control and why I hadn't told him sooner. I own my part. I said I had wanted to stage the conversation to keep as much of myself intact as possible, and that might have been selfish. He said he understood, sort of, but also that trust lost is different than trust never built, and we were now in a weird in-between. We could still build, but there was debris under the foundations, and we'd hear it clink at night. My sister keeps pushing me to forgive and move on, to invite her back into wedding plans as if she didn't turn my life into a lesson plan for the room. Here's the sticky part one can't untangle. In her twisted way, my sister wasn't purely malicious. She's seen men bail when things get hard. She watched her ex-husband default on a promise the first time it cost him comfort. She lives braced for people to fail, and she thinks preemptive exposure saves you from the worst of the drop. If I'm brutally honest, a small part of me is relieved the truth isn't hanging over us anymore. Secrets are heavy even when no one can see you carrying them. But relief is not the same as gratitude, and it doesn't erase the choice she made about my story, my timing, my dignity. I told her I won't forgive her right now, maybe not for a long time, not because I'm addicted to resentment, but because forgiveness without boundaries just invites a sequel. She called me dramatic and said I was punishing her for loving me in a way that made me uncomfortable. My fiancé wants peace before the wedding, not because he's minimizing it, but because he's terrified we'll calcify around the fracture. I don't know how to be both generous and safe at the same time. I'm still sober, still paying bills on time, still showing up to meetings, still the same person I was before that slideshow froze, except now I'm covered in labels no one can unsee. If forgiveness is a gift, it should be something I can afford, not a debt she demanded on a schedule. So tell me, if someone uses your worst chapter as a loyalty test for the person you love, even if the test is passed, are you wrong for refusing to let the proctor back into the room? ATA for cutting my dad out of my wedding after he tried to bribe my fiancé to call it off? When I got engaged, my dad told everyone he'd finally get to walk his daughter down the aisle. I smiled for the pictures, but inside I knew he didn't really mean finally, he meant before you ruin it. He's always seen me as someone who needs managing, not someone who knows what she's doing. My dad's the kind of man who keeps a firm handshake long after the other person lets go, as if control is proof of love. When I introduced him to my fiancé, Daniel, I saw that same handshake become a warning. They were polite, sure, but there was this unspoken tension that hung in the air like static. My dad comes from money. Old money. And Daniel doesn't. He grew up with a single mom, worked his way through college, and now runs a small carpentry business that's finally starting to take off. My dad called it cute. When we got engaged, I thought my dad might surprise me, maybe show some pride. Instead, he asked Daniel how he planned to support a family on a hobby. He said it jokingly, but it landed like a punch. I told him to back off, that I didn't care about the number on Daniel's paycheck. He just nodded and said, "You'll care when the bills pile up." I brushed it off as another one of his lessons, the kind I grew up with, condescending, but never cruel. But then, 2 weeks before the wedding, Daniel came home looking pale. He sat me down and said he had something to tell me but didn't know how. My dad had called him to meet privately, said he wanted to clear the air. Daniel agreed, thinking maybe they'd finally connect. Instead, my father offered him money. A lot of it. Enough to pay off Daniel's business loans and buy a small house. The only condition? He had to call off the wedding and disappear from my life quietly. My dad told him it would save me from a mistake. Daniel said no immediately, but the damage was already done. My father didn't trust him, and now Daniel didn't trust my father or me if I didn't act. I called my dad, shaking with anger, and he didn't even deny it. He said he was testing Daniel's intentions. When I told him he had no right, he said, "I'm your father. It's my job." That sentence broke something in me. Love shouldn't sound like ownership. I told him if he didn't apologize, he wouldn't be at the wedding. He laughed, said I was being emotional, and hung up. That night, Daniel told me he'd still marry me, but he didn't want my dad anywhere near the ceremony. I agreed without hesitation, but the fallout that came after was worse than I expected. The next morning, my phone blew up. My aunt, my cousins, even my mom, who divorced my dad years ago, told me I needed to reconsider. They said I was overreacting, that my dad was just protective, and that cutting him out of the wedding would humiliate him. I didn't care. What about the humiliation he caused Daniel? Or me, for that matter? But people see fathers differently. They get away with disguising control as concern. I tried to explain that this wasn't about money, it was about respect. My dad treated my relationship like a transaction. I wanted my wedding day to be about love, not power plays. When I told him he was officially uninvited, he went eerily calm. He said, "You'll regret this when you realize he married you for convenience." Then he added something that stuck with me. "You may think you're choosing love, but you're choosing poverty, and when that love fades, you'll wish you'd listened." Those words hit a nerve I didn't know was still raw. I'd grown up in comfort, yes, but I never wanted my life measured in dollar signs. I wanted meaning, partnership. And Daniel gave me that in ways my dad never could. Still, a part of me wondered if maybe my father believed he was doing the right thing. If he'd grown so used to buying control that he thought love worked the same way. The wedding day came faster than I expected, and his absence was both painful and freeing. When I walked down the aisle, it was my mom who held my arm. People whispered, but I didn't care. Daniel looked at me like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. The ceremony went perfectly, no interruptions, no tension, just joy. But I won't lie, when I threw the bouquet and saw my dad's empty chair in the corner, a small part of me ached. Later that night, my cousin texted me a photo. My dad had been standing outside the venue in his car the whole time, watching from a distance. I wanted to believe it was guilt, but I think it was pride, twisted pride. Like he needed to confirm I'd gone through with it just to prepare for my eventual failure. That realization hurt more than his absence ever could. After the honeymoon, I decided to reach out one last time. I told him if he ever wanted to apologize, I'd be willing to talk. He never did. Instead, he sent a wedding gift, a check. No note, just a number so large it felt insulting. I tore it up without showing Daniel. It wasn't a gift. It was an IOU for forgiveness, a way to buy his way back into my life. I don't think he knows that the currency I value now isn't money, it's peace. Months have passed since the wedding, and I've started to realize how deep my father's influence ran. I second-guess myself constantly, every decision, every expense, every small moment where I should just be happy. He taught me that love comes with conditions, and even though I rejected his worldview, part of me still lives by it. Daniel tells me I flinch every time he offers to pay for something, like generosity is a trap. I'm learning to unlearn that. My therapist says it's normal to grieve relationships that were unhealthy because they still shaped who you are. I think about that a lot when I see old photos, me on my dad's shoulders, both of us smiling. That man isn't gone, but he's buried under the layers of pride, fear, and control that he mistook for love. Sometimes I dream about him showing up at our door, gray and tired, saying he finally gets it. That love isn't a test or an investment, it's just trust. But then I wake up and realize that kind of humility isn't in his vocabulary. He still calls my mom to check in on us through her, which tells me he cares in his own broken way. I wish that were enough. But when someone puts a price on your happiness, you stop letting them near your joy. Maybe I'll forgive him one day, but not because he earned it, because I need the space in my heart back. People online would probably say I'm ungrateful, that family is family no matter what. But here's the truth, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. Tired of being a daughter who has to prove she's worth loving without a ledger. So yes, I cut my dad out of my wedding, and maybe that makes me the villain in his story. But in mine? It's the first time I walked down the aisle without needing his approval. And for once, that felt like love. ATA for exposing my best friend's fake illness fundraiser, even though it destroyed her life? When I met Kara in college, she was the kind of person everyone noticed first, loud laugh, magnetic energy, the one who could turn any awkward silence into a moment of warmth. We clicked fast, maybe too fast. She called me her ride or die after a month, and I believed her. Over the years, we stayed close even as our lives drifted apart, different cities, jobs, relationships. She always found a way to keep our friendship alive through long calls, voice notes, and constant posts tagging me as her sister. I never questioned her sincerity until the day she announced she'd been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. I remember reading that post and feeling like the air had been punched out of me. The caption was long, raw, heartbreaking. She said she couldn't afford treatment and that she was setting up a GoFundMe for her medical bills. I shared it instantly. Everyone did. Within a week, she raised almost $50,000. At first, I was proud of her bravery. She shaved her head, posted photos from hospital rooms, shared updates about chemotherapy and exhaustion. I called her every few days, offering to visit, but she always said she was too weak or too far from the hospital. Something about her story started to feel off, not wrong, just inconsistent. She'd talk about being bedridden one day, then post selfies from outdoor cafes the next. She said her doctor let her sneak out for mental health breaks, but I've known cancer patients, and it didn't add up. Still, I silenced my doubts. Who was I to question someone suffering like that? The real red flag came when I visited her unexpectedly. I'd driven 2 hours to drop off groceries and a care package from our college friends. When I knocked, she didn't answer right away. After a few minutes, she opened the door, no 4 lines, no fatigue, no sign of sickness at all. She looked radiant. Her hair was short but not shaved, her skin clear, her smile nervous. She said she'd just come back from treatment and was between sessions. I wanted to believe her, but there were no medications in sight, no sterile smell, no hospital bag. That night, something in me shifted. I didn't sleep. I scrolled through her posts again and started noticing details I'd missed. Recycled hospital photos from Pinterest, medical terms spelled wrong, updates that contradicted each other. I didn't want it to be true. I prayed it wasn't. But once you start seeing cracks, you can't unsee them. I tried to confront her gently. I texted her saying I was worried, that I wanted to help and maybe come to her next appointment. She called immediately, voice trembling, and said, "Don't make this harder than it already is." She accused me of doubting her pain, of being jealous of the attention she was getting. That word, jealous, burned me. I had been the one answering messages, organizing fundraisers, defending her online. But now I was the enemy because I asked for the truth. After that, she stopped responding to me entirely. Her posts continued, more dramatic than before. She said her cancer had spread, that she might need experimental treatment abroad, that her GoFundMe goal had to increase. Donations tripled. Strangers shared her story everywhere, and she became a local inspiration. Every new post twisted my stomach tighter. I felt complicit, like I was helping her rob people in plain sight. So I did what I thought I'd never do. I started digging. I reached out to the hospital she claimed she was being treated at, pretending to be a relative. They told me there was no record of her as a patient. I checked the address she listed for her oncology clinic. It didn't exist. Every lie unfolded like a thread being pulled from a sweater. I gathered screenshots, fake invoices, even photo matches that traced her treatment pics back to stock image sites. I didn't want to ruin her life. I wanted to stop something that was already rotten. I sent her one last message, begging her to come clean before someone else exposed her. She left me on read. That night, I sent everything I'd found to the GoFundMe support team and an investigative journalist who'd written about her before. Within 48 hours, the fundraiser was frozen. The next day, the news broke: local women's cancer campaign exposed as fraud. The backlash was immediate and brutal. People demanded refunds, her social media exploded with hate, and her family went into hiding. She lost her job, her apartment, her reputation. I didn't post anything about it, didn't comment, didn't defend myself. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but all I felt was hollow. The girl who used to braid my hair and cry during movie nights was suddenly a headline. I couldn't tell if I'd saved people from being scammed or just destroyed someone beyond repair. A week later, she showed up at my apartment. No cameras, no apology, just tears. She said she didn't plan for it to go that far. That it started as a small lie to cover medical debt and spiraled when people gave more than she expected. She said she convinced herself she actually was sick because it made the guilt easier to swallow. She begged me to understand, to remember who she was before all this. I wanted to. But every time I looked at her, I saw the faces of the people who donated their rent money and vacation savings to keep her alive. I asked her why she didn't just stop. She said, because being loved like that felt better than being healthy. I didn't have an answer. The authorities never charged her, most donors got refunds, and some refused to press charges out of pity. But socially, she was done. She moved to another state, deleted everything, vanished. Our friends split, half said I did the right thing, the other half said loyalty means protecting your own no matter what. Maybe they're right. Maybe friendship is supposed to be unconditional. But I keep thinking, if I had stayed silent, she would have kept lying, and the harm would have multiplied. The part that haunts me is that she didn't scam strangers, she scammed people who loved her. And maybe, in some broken way, I did too. Because I loved her enough to destroy her when I couldn't save her. Sometimes, I reread her old messages, jokes, late-night confessions, dreams of traveling together. Then I see the headline again, her mugshot next to words like fraud and betrayal. It feels surreal knowing both versions of her were real, the girl who held my hand through heartbreak and the woman who built her survival on deceit. People online keep asking if I regret it. The truth? I do and I don't. I saved hundreds from losing money, but I also lost my best friend forever. Maybe I could have handled it differently. Maybe I just didn't want to watch her drown while pretending she could swim. So tell me, when someone you love becomes a liar, are you a hero for pulling them under before they take others with them, or just another villain in their tragedy? Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed the story. See you in the next one.